I guess it's a good place to start with just your musical background because I don't know a ton about like how you started playing music and how you got to where you are now.
Musically, let's see. I started playing drums at the age 14. Um, Mostly just, I think it was just like various punk bands, hardcore bands, stuff like that in Tampa. Just kind of doing that as much as possible. Um, Got into lessons a few years in and needed some like rebuilding of technique and such. My teacher got me into like a lot of jazz from there, and yeah, just kind of worked my way through that. Played with various different people, and then yeah, just been doing that. And after a while, sorry, I'm working the headphones here. Uh, Started exploring more into, I don't know what to call it, more experimental rock kind of things. Uh, Worked with that for a while, then got, I don't know, that sort of thing kind of leads you pretty easily into various forms of improvising, whether it be within a rock context or free jazz or noise or something like that. Um, I don't know. It all kind of intermingles, and I just started getting into that. I met Nathan Corder, who is in Nude Tane, Toned, and everything. We improvised together a bit, like during Nude Tane practice and such, and kind of just showed each other things from there on. I spent time playing in various like small like groups, like trios and more like jazz oriented stuff, and just slowly got more and more into playing free, playing just like improvising, and finding how that just had the same sort of, I don't know, the same sort of fix that I was getting from that was what I got from like maybe playing punk when I was a kid and such. So that was just the real attraction to it. And from there, it just kind of like snowballed, got into more weird shit. And then, yeah, just been doing that. Got into playing solo, playing with other people. And I don't know, you just get better at certain things. And lately, I've just been finding ways to work that back into contexts of bands and more composed music and structured music.
Did you go to music school at all?
I didn't. I didn't really go to. I was in college for a little bit and I dropped out. It just wasn't really my thing. I've just always kind of worked jobs and played in bands, and I've had a few mentors though. Um, Growing up, yeah, really good, a really great first drum teacher, getting me into different things, making sure I was on the right track technique wise and stuff. I, I met a great jazz musician named Rick Adams in the St. Pete, Tampa area. He was a upright bass player from New York who had studied with like Jimmy Garrison and all those guys. Um, and he kind of like got me straightened out as far as like playing standard jazz and such. And I would meet with him every weekend and we would play music together, kind of keep me on the right path. But then slowly but surely, we just started meeting up and just improvising free. And that was a really great experience, I'd say. Yeah, so it's just been like mentors and people just kind of showing me stuff, and then showing myself stuff, learning about things. Yeah.
Did you go to high school with Nathan?
No, Nathan and I went to two different high schools, but we met just from playing in bands. And, we would just, our old bands would just like play the same show together. And then, eventually you ask each other to jam and such, and just goes from there. Yeah.
What is that scene like in Tampa, or at that time that you were playing there?
It was pretty cool. It was there was a lot going on. There would be a lot of great shows in venues, yeah, but the some of the funnest shows were happening in like storage units for the most part there at that time, which were also the storage units that all those bands practiced in, houses and such. Yeah, things like that. Not really, not a ton as far as like official venues at that time, but it was kind of better that way anyway. Um, yeah, it was good. It made for a lot of crossover and just a lot of intermingling. It was good.
Is Nude Tane one of your earliest projects with Nathan?
I'd say so. Yeah, we've been doing that since maybe 2013 or 2014. Nathan, me, and our buddy Lath, who still lives in Tampa.
Can you talk a little bit about that project, like how that got started?
Yeah, definitely. I guess it just kind of came together from Lath, Nathan, and I hanging out a lot. We played for a while, wrote like 5 or 6 songs and recorded them on a tape. I think right after that, I had one of my kidneys removed. I was donating it, and I was just kind of like laid up in my house for a while. And Nate and I we would just hang out, and for better or worse, just, I mean, given the surgery, drink a few beers and just like talk about. And from there, we just started kind of careening down the rabbit hole of more free music and improvised music, while at the same time, because I still wasn't able to go back to work due to lifting requirements, we would just jam and practice almost every day. So these things were like slowly making their way into Nude Tane, into Nude Tane's sound world. So yeah, it was just becoming more of a multifaceted rock project. And eventually we wrote another album, then did another, after a few tours, did another album as a 5-piece group that was utilizing a lot more just like improvisational techniques, a lot more just free, like, I don't know, kind of just like, how do I put it? Just modular structures, things moving in order to give way to like free play, but within a structure. Just typical kind of improvising rock group.
So what was that process for that particular group? And this might be different for the different groups that you've been in, but for that group, when you're talking about modular structures, is it like you decide on certain sounds that you're exploring or sounds that you're going to use for pieces, or is it more of like just a structural type of thing?
That band, when we would do it, especially with our 5-piece group, which had 2 guitars, bass, drums, and vocals, it was more like, here's the structure being like a rhythmic structure, and we would kind of put it together utilizing cues, mostly from the drums, to like bring us into the next part of the piece. And within it, certain rules of like, okay, any any one or two people can leave this rigid, like somewhat rigid framework, as long as two other people are kind of holding it down, and leaving it as in, you can leave it as far as you want, like just like rip feedback completely over this like churning cyclical kind of structure. And that's kind of more like it. It was kind of just like a reaction to what we were listening to at the time, which I guess would have been like Ornette Coleman's like later like rock oriented projects, like primetime stuff, and then just like early Skin Graft Records kind of stuff. You know, just like things that were utilizing improvisation in ways that were different than just jazz, and not so much just completely free improv just yet. Not, it wasn't yet like sound based improvisation for us.
If it wasn't sound based, then it was process based.
Yeah, it was more so just like process and structurally based. Yeah.
And then like in rehearsals, would you record rehearsals and like build off of ideas that you had in rehearsal that you thought were like particularly cool moments, or like how did that work?
There was a little bit of that, but more so just exploring it in the moment every time we played. Yeah, it wasn't something we thought too hard about. It was just kind of, yeah, just something we all did. And then you go on tour and it either gets better or some nights it's not so good. Some nights it's really hit, and it just all depends on so many other things. Yeah.
So in comparison to that group, or not necessarily in comparison, but can you talk a little bit about Toned and how that project might be different, and also just like how you got started and what your approach is?
Toned's a funny group. So all right, so let me think about this. Nude Tane, we would have taken a break, I think around 2015, 2016. Maybe right before 2016. Nathan went to Mills College. I stayed in Tampa. I started playing drums for this band Merchandise. I was touring with them a good amount, and Nathan grew up with those guys as well as a Tampa band. And we were doing a West Coast tour, and we were going to play San Francisco. I convinced them to let Nathan sit in with the band on guitar for that show, and they were all about it. And we got to the show, and Nate was like, "Hey, can my buddy Tom play as well?" And we were like, "Of course, sounds great." And so I met, he had been playing a bit with Tom in the Bay Area, Tom Weeks. And we had him join in, and it was great. And we stayed in touch, and just kind of after a while, we talked it over. I think Nathan and Tom had done a duo album of electronics and alto sax, and we talked a bit about doing a trio at some point. So we kind of just talked about it, booked a bunch of East Coast dates, and they flew out here, and we just put it together. We practiced like twice, I think. And then ripped a bunch of shows. It was great. And we've been doing that since 2018, I believe. And that's of course an awesome project. It's kind of an interesting process. I mean, if I had it my way, we would obviously live in the same place and we would practice like once a week, that kind of stuff. But I mean, it is what it is. But for some reason we get together, and it's not really hard to like snap back into it. think a lot of it has to do with the fact that like I talk to those guys every day. You know, we just like we have a way of communicating with each other, as in like a person to person dialogue, that when we actually start playing music, it's hardly different from our conversations with each other. I bet if you printed out our dialogues with each other and then listened to a recording or watched a video of us without knowing who's who, you could probably point it out. But yeah, no, I love playing with those guys. There's a little bit more of it works a little bit like just like more of like a free improv trio. I tend to try to gravitate towards more cyclical things within these improvisations to like kind of, I don't know, I enjoy repetition even in like a free setting, maybe just like a little bit, and to bring something in to that setting can be nice sometimes. We focus sometimes on solos and pulling things in and out to different sound worlds through that.
Is every time you play together like a completely new thing, or do you have, you know, pieces that you've worked out, like let's do this kind of thing, or at this show, or let's do this other thing?
I think we've done that more in practice and not so much at the shows. The shows we kind of just get up there and rip. But I feel like we are conscious of when someone might be directing this improvisation towards a more, I don't know, like bringing it down into like a more like quieter realm, more like sound based realm, and then maybe something, I don't know, when I think those guys are really good about catching on to when things are repeating in the right way and how to play off of that in a way that's like, I don't know, let's say one person is just like repeating a cycle, either the electronics or something, like, or the drums. I think everyone has a way of playing off of that so that it does get established as a repeating theme, but isn't so much like just like a hard repeat. You know what I mean? It's just kind of just like a motif we play off of, and then as soon as you're in it, you're out of it, you know?
With Nude Tane, would you say that those pieces are much more composed than what you're doing with Toned, or have the same? Because when you listen to the album, they feel like some of them are songs that got lyrics that feels very put together.
Oh yeah, Nude Tane, I mean, those are songs, you know. There's just, because I mean, when we play it live, it's structurally it's always the same. Just the improvisations that happen within those structures and maybe how much they're expanded or contracted due to when someone wants to make a cue into the next part, that changes every time. But no, Nude Tane, those are pretty much rock songs basically. And Toned is more, I mean, Toned is like a completely different band, just an improvising unit. But when it comes to recording, I think we'd like to bring this idea of like an improvisational piece recorded to be like source material for working out a larger composition, being the recording itself, being the album format. And from there, like viewing the music in this way kind of feeds back into the way we play live, you know. you're aware of a sound that you've established for yourself, and not to like just harp on that same sound over and over again, but you're aware of like a spirit to this music that you're doing. And I don't know, when you get up and play on stage, it's kind of like, I don't know, it feels like you know.
I wonder if you could tell us a little more about your solo playing, and I guess when you started becoming more serious about developing that alongside of these, I guess, chamber projects, bands, whatever you want to call them, how that's been maybe a different journey, or how it's been similar.
Yeah, the solo stuff, I think it also had something to do with me being up here, like being in Philadelphia and having more, like having daily practice by myself, just like practicing every day. And just being able to work this sort of thing out, having the time to kind of develop more of a system for myself. Yeah, it's quite different. I'd say I don't know how to explain it. The solo stuff, it's kind of a weird exploration as far as like how musical I can make this instrument. Kind of just focusing a little bit more on, how do I put it? Just focusing a little bit more on tones and sounds, not so much hard rhythms, but still living inside of a pulse world, because it is the drums after all. Trying to balance these two things, the world of pulse and just like the world of pure sound on the kit, and just trying to find something that works well within both of those. Yeah, I'm not trying to play with the solo stuff. I don't really feel like I'm playing completely free at all. I don't really feel like I'm playing completely improvised, because even though I'm like making up as I go along, I'm catching on to motifs and themes within it, and just kind of working it around throughout. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, because
Totally.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Kyle.
I was gonna say totally, and ask if you could talk about the system that you're referring to. Is this the 3-point system that you developed for your album Marbles on Tile?
Yeah, I'd say that was like the first thing that I started working with, because that was my first solo album. I'd say that was the first thing I started working with, and that was more like, okay, you got, so like 3 points, let's call it just like three sound sources on the kit. Let's say just like the bell of a ride cymbal, the rim of a snare drum, and just this rack tom up here. That in itself creates a triangular sort of system. But taking those 3 sounds and working around them, maybe like improvising around these things, and working with them so that you come back to them, and within those things happening over and over again, you're kind of creating a structure just like that. You're improvising around these 3 sounds, and you're kind of finding a way for them to just have a dialogue with each other. From there, you kind of get that working. Then you bring in like another dialogue between like the bass drum and the hi-hat. That in itself creates another foundation for a triangular structure to sit on top of and work around. I know it sounds crazy, but
I mean, it does
I feel
exactly.
like it works for me.
You're essentially creating like a group, like an
Mhm.
ensemble that you can, so that you can listen from different vantage points. That's what it sounds like.
Exactly. It is much more based on color and just color and sound. I mean, the rhythmic part comes the rhythmic part it's going to come just from, you know, 15 years of playing the drum set, you know. So it's going to be there no matter what. But like to focus on to put sound first is, I don't know, is kind of the focus on that album. I put out another album after that, which was a little bit more improvised, and I have another album coming out in springtime that is actually much more. It actually lives much more in the beat realm. It's like there's like almost no improvisation on it, but it's derived from improvisational processes, and that's much more of like, you know, getting in there, ripping the kit, recording it, picking it apart, and just being like, okay, let me extrapolate on this one segment of this improvisation. Let me pull this out and work with it and develop it and bring it back into like working with it as some crazy drum beat. And yeah, and that's kind of what I've been working on the past few months or so.
When you say working with it, are you like transcribing the recordings that you've made? Are you doing some digital processing to extrapolate on it so you can listen back to and have some ideas, or what's that process like?
Um, if we're talking about the newest stuff, there was some transcriptions, but more so just for reference. Transcriptions, but also like sketches, and then working it back into the drums. There is also another element to this next album that's coming out, and that is utilizing a mixer next to me while I play. And this is a new development that I think I started doing it over the summertime, uh, where I'm kind of working with kind of when I, you know, like taking sounds from the drums, boosting their resonating qualities after hitting the drum through just like cranking the gain on the mixer, and just making this thing project far more than it would just from a dry drum set. And that in turn is creating more of like a cloud for this work to sit in, like a cloud of resonance in a way. And everything kind of sits on top of that. But yeah, I guess like my inspiration for that has come more from like strange electronic music than anything. And even though even though the building blocks I'm using are techniques derived from being an improviser, I'm taking those tools and bringing them back into a world of like just focusing on beats. So it's kind of this funny thing of like venturing out into the forest and bringing these tools back to like build a house or something.
Is the mixer that you're using there doing any kind of computer processing, or is it all just cranking the gain or adding any reverb or anything like that?
No computer processing. I've been told to get into it, but I just don't think I have it. I just don't. I'm somehow just like not super interested in it. It's merely just like the bare bones of amplifying a drum set using microphones and a mixer, but just manipulating like the gain and such with all these things. And yeah, I think it's got a great, I think it's a good direction. And I think it's probably what I'm going to be working on for a while within the solo context. Yeah. And that album will be out springtime on Dinzu Artifacts, LA cassette label.
Can you talk a little bit about your solo snare drum album and how you are? I'm super curious. Two things. One is that, are you using electronics on this? Because some of that stuff sounds like there is something going on beyond just gain. And and also, how are you treating that instrument, which is such a limited palette compared to the whole kit? How are you thinking about exploring the depths of the sound that one particular drum can give you?
Totally. That album was recorded right after Tone's tour got canceled, like so right after lockdown. So it's like I had like another week off that would have been Tone tour before going back to work, so I just recorded it. But yeah, I had been getting into just solo snare drum, well, just improvising on the snare drum after I had broken my hand in 2018, and right around then I had started improvising with Ada Adiatma, also known as Madame Data, and Jack Wright. Mostly those two I would play with separately, like maybe once a week, but just with a snare drum and a left hand. And that was kind of like, okay, I have just this snare drum, one hand. I have to, I have to learn to like improvise this way. I don't have to, but I want to. But mostly I wanted to find a way to, how do I put this? To work towards extension. I don't know if that's the right word. Extension on a snare drum with one hand, like playing because you can't play a roll with one hand. Well, you can, but not really. So just like trying to find different techniques that fill up space, create stasis, and can like move forward on like linearly. So I started working just on something as simple as taking a metal bowl and just rubbing it on the head for a while. Like things like that, creating a landscape basically on the snare. I got a lot more into like drummers like Burkhard Bynes and his playing with the snare drum. The trio Meridian, like that trio's great. Just seeing the ways in which they kind of like get into this. And yeah, just decided to like record some of these things and like kind of like focus them as like etudes and record them one by one. I think there's a few tracks where there might be a contact mic involved, like under the snare wires. But mostly it's just like, I think the first track is like Super Balls on a snare drum, super hot mic on it. And there's another one where it's just like I'm literally running a upside down hi-hat on the snare through the prongs of a fork to create like a kind of like a sine wave sort of thing. And yeah, I think there's one where I'm just like kind of malleting that same hi-hat cymbal next to a mic super close, creating bass tones. that's something that drummer Andrea Belfi is really fond of doing. Kind of got it from him in a way, but like worked it in my own way. But there's sort of that kind of stuff going on. There's no processing really, just a super hot mic and some objects.
So I'm wondering how the pandemic has impacted your artistic work. I guess you kind of pointed to one way in that your tour got canceled, so you ended up coming out with a solo album. But I'm just curious, how else it impacted your artistic work, because obviously it's impacted a lot of musicians in the last, I guess it's been basically a year. So
it really ate up the tours pretty well. It did a good job of that, but I still just, I was lucky enough to like not lose my job or anything, so I just kept working. There was a long time where it was just me practicing by myself, and in that time I was able to kind of just work out these ideas I had that are going towards this next solo release. But eventually my band Carnivorous Bells, which I do here, we went back to meeting up once a week, finished writing our next LP. I started recording more drums to go towards the next merchandise album, and recording some ideas for Toned. We met up, and me, Nathan, and Tom, and recorded in California for the next Toned record. So it's been like kind of a funny thing where, it's like I haven't played a show in a long time. I did play one show in a parking lot with TJ Borden. It's a great duo. And then we played with our friend Mary Staubitz as a trio the week after. So we played 2 shows in this parking lot in North Philly, but that's about it. But I feel like I've been lucky enough to be super busy with recordings, and that's been fun. Got some things coming out soon too. So I've been doing a few sessions here with James McCain and TJ Borden, and that's been great time. Just working on a few things. Toned has a new record coming out soon on the 1039 label. It's Kevin Murray and Aaron Rubenstein's new label. So look out for that one. That's like some stuff we recorded together in California, as well as some other things. So it's been, I think I've gotten the most out of it, which is nice.
When does your solo album come out?
So I think it's going to be, I don't know. I don't know the exact date, but I'm guessing springtime, probably March or April.
In your solo work, have you worked to extend the sound of any other parts of the drum kit besides the snare drum?
I think I feel like when it comes to the full kit, I've been trying to kind of, I don't know, I guess I've been doing some extensions here and there to all of the drums. Whether it be just like a really thin head on the kick drum to make it more of like a resonating object than something that's associated with purely just attack. Different, just working different things on the heads, objects on the cymbals. That's about it, really. But just trying to do my own thing with all of it.
Leo, when you're about to work with someone new, or I guess I don't know that you're always like looking for people to work with, but I'm just wondering, like, when you're looking into collaborators, like what is it that if are there any specific things that you're looking for, or like what, how would you describe the good qualities of, especially like an improvising collaborator?
Yeah. I'd say someone who listens. I know it sounds obvious, but like someone who just listens really well. I lately I've been more I've been concerned with, not concerned, but like more like put more focus on like, can I like kick it with this person? Can I like hang out? Can I like, I don't know, drink a few beers and like, can we talk about the music together or other things? But like, I actually am someone who likes to talk about how something went musically, or like, I don't know. I know a lot of like some people aren't into that, but I do like to kind of, I don't know, have conversations about this stuff. And I'd say these days that's more important to me. And just kind of like, maybe like, I don't know, if you could play, stop playing, and then talk about a point in time within that improvisation, and pull it out and focus on it in some way. Like, I don't know, I feel like there's a lot that could be done within a practice space that other than just improvising together, I feel like there's more that can be done to further your abilities to improvise together. And that being just like saying, hey, let's focus on this one sound for 10 minutes straight. Ada and I would do that all the time, and I don't know, I felt like it kind of strengthened our actual improvisations when we play live.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate your time, Leo. This was great.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah.
I'm glad we got the Zoom figured out. I'm glad I got the Zoom figured out.
You did great.
Awesome, y'all. I'll talk to you guys soon.
Sounds great.
Sounds good, Leo.
Cool.
Have a
Take
good
care,
night.
guys. Have a good one.